It's not a perfect world we're living in here.
We've lost plenty before.
I know, exactly. We've lost plenty before. So in terms of today, how we want to maybe structure things.
Okay.
I do like this idea, and I'm going to find it while I'm speaking to you. I'm just going to look it up on my phone. Of using this, and she told me I could use her first name. Lisa's email, in which she just says this one line, which I think is quite good. So
This is the one in response to our last session?
yeah. So she responded, and she just used this one line, which I like. I automatically get on the triggered treadmill on with my family of origin. Can this triggering ever be truly resolved?
Can this trigger ever be? Does she qualify what she means by this trigger treadmill? She's suggesting that it's negative.
Right.
Yeah, we need more context.
Right, but I think we can just go into it from there. Now I can go on. I mean, she goes on, and I don't think we want to spend much time going. I mean, you remember the email that she sent?
I do remember.
Right, so it's like
really kind of personal.
Right.
And we've named her, so.
Well, she said we could use a name, and I said, so she seems to be. I think, but how? I don't know if we want to go into all these details. Are they as important to the viewer? Like to go into my life with my family of origin has bumped up a notch, and this had to do with it. But we could say
she's presented a topic for us to expand on.
Yeah. And we could, and then I can say, well, I know she has elderly parents she's dealing with. She's dealing with a brother who is a little obstinate. She's got, her own family, her immediate family.
But something we were discussing elicited this.
Right. That whole thing about being, remember we were talking, Mai was talking a lot about being seen and held.
Yes, yes.
And I think what's happening with her is she's really like working all these, mostly like trying to help her aging parents who are ill, go through whatever last chapter they're going through, and in the but not getting really appreciated for it. Her brother doesn't.
She's being bombarded with.
She's being bombarded
difficulties, and she's got to be heroic.
Right. She's overwhelmed almost all the time, and you can tell. I mean, I know this person personally. So she's feeling overwhelmed almost all the time. So I think that
won't hold.
What's that?
That won't hold. I mean, she's human, so
right. But
being overwhelmed.
Do we want to talk about that? That I think what's interesting about this, what's interesting for me, is this whole issue of how we resolve our inner conflicts within the context of our family of origin. Like that those relationships are the sort of primary relationships through which we then relate to the whole world, And so I think
it's how we learned how to relate to the whole world, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting point. I mean, it may be off topic here, but one of the things you learn when you train to do what I do, and I'm not sure how I learned it. It was, I'd hate to think it's from a lecture or a textbook, but I'm sure if it had been, it was reinforced by reality. What we learn as therapists is that a grand theme in the consultation room is that you represent, meaning the therapist represents the good dad or the good mom, and what the therapist witnesses from the patient, certainly in the beginning, is the raw stuff of how that original parenting that they got and didn't got played out. And it reveals to you the things that need attention and maybe course correction, if not just compassion. Parenting is central to how we operate in the world and how we cope with the world and all of its difficulties and trials and tribulations. And it's so interesting. Maybe we'll get to what you and I were talking about minutes before you put us on air here, because it's all related, of
Right.
course.
It is all related. It's all related, again, so this is why I think like this, why I liked and I appreciated Lisa's sharing with us, is I think that then our relationship to our family of origin is then becomes part of our unfolding as well, and that so we learn about how to relate to the world from our parents, from the models that they set, from how they treated us, right? And then how,
which is always flawed to some degree.
absolutely. I mean, so nobody's perfect, nobody, and that's okay,
It'll have to be.
Well, it just is, right? So it is. So things that are by definition have to be okay ultimately, right? But we have to be okay with them. But then what I find really interesting with Lisa, and to some extent with my own life right now, in terms of being around my family of origin and my parents who are.
Why are we terming it family of origin? What do you?
Well, because
at?
What I'm getting at is the family we grew up with, the household that we grew up
Oh,
with.
and not necessarily be the biological.
Well, I guess I'm trying to it is the biological family. We could say the biological family. I'm just using the family.
I say family.
Yeah. Well, because, when I say family, I also, for me, now where I am in my life, I have, really dear friendships that are an important part of my life right now,
family.
especially that I do consider family. And that has to do some with me and my being single and not married and not having my own kids. So my sense of family has,
So it's revelatory that you qualify family of origin.
in a way, yeah, that's good. Yeah. So I look at that as, okay, I have my family of origin, and then I have my sense of who is a part of my bigger sense of family, but my bigger sense of family also includes important people in my life that I didn't grow up with, and I'm not related to by blood,
but have just as profound meaning and purpose in your life as maybe your family of origin.
At this
point,
at least
more active anyway.
At this point, yes. I mean, they're people who I'm processing my own development and growth more so in some ways with these people than I am with my family I grew up with. And I think in some ways that's not unusual, but maybe it is unusual. I don't know. I think it's
so. Yeah. Lisa hit a chord with you.
She hit a chord with me because of
enough for you to remember it for the whole week, to address it, to carry it on.
To say that I think that this is an interesting line of inquiry, and it resonated with me. I also just empathize with her, that she's a woman who is feeling like kind of pulled in 1,000 different directions, and she's trouble, and she's a good person. You can tell she wants to be, there for everyone, but there's only so much of her to go around, right? So she's getting exhausted and
well, because she's not taking care of herself in this.
Right, exactly. She's not taking care of herself in this. And then she's feeling, because there's too much of everybody on her plate, you're never feeling like you're giving anyone quite enough, right? Because it's like you can't. It's impossible to do in this situation. So then you get that feeling of not being enough. And that's something that I really can resonate with right now in terms of.
That implies, when you make a judgment not being enough, that implies that curse word that always rings a bell with me, should. Should is the dirtiest fucking word in human intercourse. Because what you're doing is inviting in, whether you know it or not, a judgment that was derived outside of yourself. Lisa is struggling because she's spreading herself thin and can't live up to these standards that she believes she should be living up to.
Which were given to her, by the way, by the family of
How
origin.
ironic.
So that's why I find this so particularly interesting.
You find it particularly interesting because you're going through the same thing, apparently.
To some extent, yeah. To some extent, I am going through the same thing with, my family of origin, my siblings and my parents. I'm feeling, I love them dearly, but I feel somehow I'm not either measuring up or showing up the way they would like me to.
The way they would like you to.
I think, yes, the way
Okay.
I perceive that they would like me to.
You could explore that with them directly, couldn't you?
Yeah, and I'm trying that. It's just, it's not easy, I mean.
Well, it's not easy because they consider that weird, I'm sure. They're from a whole
they
nother
definitely
world.
consider me weird. That's definitely part of it. I mean, I know that my family actually loves me quite a lot. And I think even to the extent of admires me in terms of some of the independence that I've created in my life. But they also think, they're, I found myself recently identifying with the LGBTQ community. I've met
In what regard?
in the regards of probably the last couple of generations, maybe let's say the last 50 years, that's more than a couple of generations, of how that community has found itself and has been able to come into some sense of mainstream. Like I think about
Asserted itself.
yes, it's asserted itself, but also has a support group in and of itself that is where people are finding a sense of family, a sense of belonging that they may have in many cases not felt in their family of origin. Right. And I'm saying things are evolving, and so people are much more accepting of this community and getting more accepting. But just I have someone in my next generation, and again, I want to be careful about, who I implicate in this, who has come out as gay in my family. Okay. And I remember when they were 16 years old when they came out, and I remember crying. And I remember,
how old were you?
I was in my 40s at that time.
Oh, okay.
And I remember crying for them in the sense of just being so grateful that they were growing up in a time when they could express that to their family and that they felt supported and in who they were. They felt comfortable enough with their family of origin that they were in, that they could come out and feel supported and that kind of thing. When, there's just so many stories of people from that community killing themselves.
Right.
A big percentage of people from that community 2 or 3 generations ago would get so despondent they would kill themselves. I mean, there's like some crazy amount of statistics on that. And so why I'm finding myself identifying with it is that sense of, okay, I'm feeling different. I know I'm a little weird, right? But what I want,
in a way that's unacceptable on paper, at least to the judgors, which are your family.
Yeah, to some degree, it feels that way.
Right.
So
it is that way.
Right.
Which is why it feels that way.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I want to be again, I feel timid about throwing my family under the bus here,
I don't think you're doing that. I think you're describing something that unfolds naturally, and there isn't anybody out there that doesn't completely understand what you're talking about.
I hope so. I mean, again, it's something which I'm working through right now in terms of loving myself, owning who I am, and then realizing that I love my family and I appreciate them. And it's sort of just like what I feel like with Lisa is that she doesn't feel seen or appreciated or held. It's all about how she's filling these roles for other people, right? And that's something which I think I can identify with. I know, not think, I can identify with that.
Right.
It's like we're filling our roles, and that's important.
So what advice would you give Lisa?
What I keep telling Lisa is to love herself, and to create space for
That's
herself.
easy and it sounds glib, except coming from you, we know that has deep and specific meaning. I wonder if she understands what that means for her. Because my advice would be similar, although I would use different words.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get more specific with people. Well, how do I do that?
Yes.
And
yes. Okay.
Right.
So if she said, great, how do I do that? You say,
well, from my yoga and meditative perspective, and what I do for myself is to create space for myself, to create space for myself in which to do things which take care of myself. I'll just, I'll tell a quick story. And again, I'm feeling a little timid about this, but last time I was in Maine, my brother described me as being kind of spaced out, like, oh, you seem spaced out. And I thought about that for a while. I meditated on it, and I realized it wasn't, for me, I wasn't feeling so much spaced out, like I wasn't present or something. I was creating space. I was going for these long walks in the morning. I was going for swims by myself. I was taking time to write in my journal and write some cards to people. I was doing things which took care of me, even though I was with my family. So it feels like I'm detached in a way, right?
And it looks selfish.
And it looks self-absorbed. But really, for me, what it was about creating safe space for myself within the context of the family dynamic. It's not like I was doing that all the time.
Right.
It was just like I was creating these sort of rituals for myself that took care of me, and this is all, the other thing about this, and why, again, I'm timid about this is all on very subtle levels. There's no, nothing directly abusive or anything like that about my family. It's just more about these sort of feelings of am I in the inner circle, or am I in the outer, it's like, and so it's sort of just a kind of, I'm just,
I want to take off on something that might be a little off subject. You said you meditated on it, how you felt when your brother said you were
when my
spaced
brother
out.
said I was spaced
You
out
meditated
upon that. Yeah.
Help me understand what that means, because I got shit I'd like to meditate on, but I don't. To me, meditation is a letting go and opening up, a finding interesting whatever shows up.
Right.
How do you meditate on that?
Something? So first, okay, that's good. That's a good question. I meditate. So, and then maybe this would better be said as inquiry or contemplation, which are levels of aspects of meditation. So
now you're getting directive inside yourself.
So what? Yeah, no. So I'll get into a meditative place of kind of spaciousness, of availability, of sort of softness, of sort of non-judgmental awareness. So these are all techniques to get to that place. And then I'll just kind of invite this thing about, what was that my brother said about me being spaced out? What?
So you set the,
So it's like I set the sort of paradigm for something to come in, which I can look at something without getting defensive or saying, what is, so like, just also you're trying to kind of see it from their perspective, like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see how I might have seemed kind of spaced out, even though that's not actually how I felt at the moment. It was something, and so it's just creating a space in which you can take a circumstance and then kind of drop it in and watch it, almost like
I think that's beautiful, and that really helps me. I'm sitting here thinking I can do that. I've never done that. creating a neutral availability, a neutral readiness. That's worthwhile. So what would you tell Lisa to do?
Well, I've talked to her a little bit about just practicing her meditative practices, her breathing practices, and to create that space. It's like almost like you're creating a little buffer between yourself and those stories of should, right? So you have these stories of should that you just talked about. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be doing this. I should be doing this for this person.
Yeah, says who?
Right. But there's a lot of that, right? I mean, this is a lot of indoctrination that comes into all of us. We all have this in our lexicon of thinking. How do I create some space for that? So that to get separate of that, and that's where meditation can come in. That's where this mindfulness can come in. We kind of create a space from that, from which we can then look at it from a more neutral observation. And we can really start to see from that place, hopefully, what is someone else's stuff in this and what is my stuff in this.
But that won't change the
dynamic,
external landscape.
Right.
So what I would do,
yeah,
as a psychologist, is explore with her, first of all, what these shouldisms are.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get her to understand that she's not the source of them, that she is doing what she is driven to do because of the person she is. And maybe I would highlight what a good person she is for operating this way. And then I think functionally I get her to try to confront it. And how do you do that? Confront them. Not well. Confront is a heavy-handed word. To express to them how you're feeling, how I'm feeling in all of this, and so that at least I would be better understood, which would be a comfort to me and a relief to me. Mm-hmm. So I would take some action that
right, but that
invited.
I agree with you on that, and I to how do we express to others how the situation,
because
or action,
after all, the strength I'm coming from is I'm the expert on me.
Right.
They can't say you shouldn't feel that way. I do feel that way. Case closed. Mm-hmm. Whether that's misguided or not is irrelevant.
Right.
I'm reporting how I feel. That is a given.
Right.
And you work from there. Of course, in a dialogue, you find out what the experts on the individual, how they react to you. And that's a way, I think, to come to some understanding, even if you wind up with a rift. But this would give Lisa, I mean, whatever this chasm is, I think narrows it.
So your prescription then is to.
Well, my prescription is first to do what you suggested.
Right.
That sounded great.
Right. And then kind of explore.
If she knows how to do it.
And then you would say you would find this sort of space in
let's take some action. Let's do something. There's no change without doing something.
I agree in the, well, I think there can be no change. There can be change on this internal level, which takes doing the meditation and doing the inquiry.
But that's very selfish. And you and I have butted heads about this in the past, where I have felt that there's a real impasse in the beauty and wholeness of your ethic, your global ethic versus mine. And we talked about it in terms of raising children. Mm-hmm. You remember?
Yes, I do.
So I don't think you can do what you're suggesting and be unto yourself at the expense of the other obligations you have in the world.
So Yeah, I mean, we have other obligations and other people to deal with. The question I have is, you set this up a while ago about changing the external circumstance, that nothing's going to change unless we do something. But here's the thing, I think for the
And
sense,
do something different, but go ahead.
I think for ourselves, we can make changes in how we interact with others, how we choose to interact with others, and whether we want to bring things up, which we know might be uncomfortable for us or probably for them too. I mean, to sort of express to ourselves, to others who we care about, that that there's some part of our dynamic that makes us unhappy, makes everybody vulnerable, right? And so we have to have the kind of courage to go into that space, knowing that making others feel vulnerable can be a volatile situation, right? So we have to be prepared for that. Let me just finish for a second, because I think the thing is, if we're going into those situations with a sense of like vulnerability about the whole thing, and then expecting that there's going to be a change, that I think is another setup for ourselves. That's the thing. Like, we can change ourselves and become more self-aware, and then change the way we try different experiments with our own behavior. But that notion of getting other people to change, it just, how do I put it? It's like, it might happen. And it happens, I think, ultimately by our being okay with ourselves.
And
That's because then people will eventually come around to
that's a point of departure.
being okay with you.
That's a point
See,
of
like,
departure.
if I'm in a homophobic family and I'm gay, and I just come home one day and say, hey, I'm gay and I need you to accept it and accept me, they're not going to do that, by the way, right? It's going to take them a while, and the only way they're going to get there is if I keep working on my being okay with being gay.
That's
what I mean?
Yes, I see exactly what you mean, and it's an important preliminary enterprise. But in 60 years, doing that hasn't gotten the Dalai Lama 1 inch closer to what closer to independent or free, liberated Tibet. And his whole purpose on earth, besides being happy, which is what he says is your purpose on earth, is politically to make change for the suffering in Tibet. And he does it fully by doing exactly what you say. And in 60 years, he's still on square 3.
Right.
Because he isn't doing anything external differently from what he was doing before. If what you're doing isn't working and you want change, that's an essential.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do something differently.
You have to try different experiments. I agree.
But you're talking about different experiments within yourself, and then in some, I don't know, passive way influence those around you that care.
You could, I mean, there's, no, you could not necessarily passive. I mean, you're interacting with others in different ways. It could be more forceful. It could be less forceful. It could be telling people to go screw themselves, whatever it is, right? I mean, but it's coming from a place of wisdom within you, as opposed to, I'm not okay, and I'm just going to project it onto. That always leads to some form of violence. Some form of violence, whether it be just speaking violence or whatever. That I'm not okay, so I'm just going to project it out onto you, as opposed to I am okay. I want this external situation to change. I'm going to try something different here. Maybe I'm going to try a little as I think I gave this example once when I learned how to coach in rowing. Like what I used to call the judicious use of anger can be very effective. Like you get angry at these young athletes, and they'll all of a sudden they'll kind of like, oh, I'm supposed to do something different, you know? Like, so it's not like you have to be passive to try to do change, but you want to be conscious. Like, I'm not just getting frustrated and taking it out on these teenage boys that I'm coaching when I was coaching rowing, right? I am using anger in this moment as a tool to try to affect change.
Right.
That's a very different,
Yes.
those are two very different things.
Agreed.
Right. So, you know, I read something today. Somebody sent me this little joke, and it said, if you think you're ineffective, just realize that it took 20 years, trillions of dollars, and 4 presidents
To get out
to
of it.
get the Taliban to get the Taliban to leave and come back, or something like that. You know, so basically, you know, we're just trying some experiment here. This is a 20-year, $10 trillion experiment that, you know, that basically got the Taliban to become the Taliban, right? So, you know, when you say the Dalai
That's
Lama,
not a funny joke, but
no, it's not a funny joke, but when you say the Dalai Lama hasn't been successful, you know, maybe he hasn't freed Tibet. However, he's affected millions and millions of people around the world in terms of their journey towards some freedom and happiness. So,
true.
you know,
Absolutely right.
right. So, you know, you're just, yeah, and we don't want to get into Afghanistan right now, but you know, that's my point is we do the best we can, but ultimately, can we work on ourselves in ways that help to free us from the dynamic that then maybe help free others? And again, this is
Right.
why I like using my little bit of knowledge from the gay community, because that really seems to be the way that they've reinforced themselves. You're going to become okay with yourself, right? And as you become more and more okay with yourself, other people will start to become okay with you as well, who weren't okay before.
Right.
That seems to be working. That system is working.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there's still problems, but it seems to be working. It's pretty incredible.
It is.
You know, so that's the way I want to work on it with Lisa and myself and other people, is how do we get really okay with who we are, to recognize that I'm a good person doing good things in the world. I'm not perfect, make mistakes. And the more okay I become with that, ultimately other people will become okay with it too. You know, not everybody, you know, you're not going to change Tibet maybe in one Dalai Lama's lifetime, right? I mean, these are long arcs, you know, things like Tibet, you know, long arcs. And China is very, very patient. So meaning they look at things in way longer timelines than Westerners do. So they're like, yeah, we'll just keep the pressure on.
Right.
You know. So, but that doesn't mean that it won't be. I mean, you want to believe that somehow truth ultimately prevails, but it can take a long time. So, yeah, I mean, we're in the midst of it in this country in lots of ways. I'm just trying to think about how can we individually, this is what really matters to me, Norman, is how do we individually, and then within our circle of the people who we care about, how do we start to affect change so that we can be at peace and equanimity with ourselves and each other? And then more, you know, if we can do that, then maybe this can start to grow up into the rest of the world. If we start to become in peace and in harmony with ourselves and with our environment, regardless of some of the fact that the environment is disturbing, then, you know, maybe we can.
I think you've hit on it. I think that maybe the only authentic way to do that is to be it. I think you have to live it. You have to discover what it is, first of all, and then be true to yourself about it, in much the same way you just described. And I think you need to have the courage to put it out there in as uncensored a way as you can for people to accept or reject it or engage with you or to walk away from you or embrace you or whatever is going to happen. But what's happening is they are reacting to and being influenced by, whether they like it or not, a person who is representing themselves authentically. And that's different than what most people do.
Right. Most people are doubling down on the roles that they think they're supposed to play.
Right.
And that's what's happening
Right.
with Lisa, right? Lisa is doubling down on the being the good mom, being the good sister, being the good daughter, right? She's doubling down on that, and she's exhausting herself to the point of, I'm concerned about her mental health. That's what's going on. And so what I want for her is to feel and know her okayness. I am, and however you want to make up this in your head, I am a good mom, I am a good sister, I am a good daughter. Here's, by the way, how I'm going to show up for those things. Stop taking in all the external feedback, which is all about everybody else's expectations.
Right.
Stop it. Just like put up a buffer zone. This is my spaced out thing, right? Put up the fucking buffer zone about all what your father's saying, what your mother's saying, what your brother's saying, even what your kids are saying, right?
Or what you're putting in their mouths.
And yeah, whatever's coming back to you about how you're not showing up quite good enough, right? You gotta kind of put a really big screen. Doesn't mean you don't hear any of it, because some of it has some, like, we need to get some feedback every once in a while. But you just sort of say, here's how I can show up for these people. And I know it's good. I know it may not be exactly what they think it should be or want,
and it's the best I can do.
But this is to the extent that I can play these roles. And by the way, these roles are just part of me. They're not all of me. They're just this, they're these roles. Just like I am a brother, I am a son, those kind of things. Those are part of me. And I try to honor those parts of me, but they're not all of me, And so it's like, I also want to be able, and again, maybe I'm unusual in this, but I want to be able to have a more holistic relationship with my family of origin, which is not just, oh, I'm your brother or I'm your son. I'm also this other person who's doing these other things. And I would like to be able to integrate that. And I have these other relationships too that I would like to be able to integrate, So it's, but that is my stuff. That's my stuff to deal with. My desires.
But it's instructive because you've identified the sphere of things that you can control. And that's what you're spending your resources on, what you can control. And that implies being able to, and this is really important, being able to distinguish it from the stuff you can't control and not squandering your resources on that.
Right. So that the thing you can't control in these dynamics is how the other people are going to react, or whether
their expectations, their should-isms,
so this notion of doing all this work, this self-work, and maybe the vulnerability work of sharing how something feels with you, with the notion that, well, they're going to change if you do this. It's like, that is the setup. That's not the reason why you do it. You do it to create some peace and equanimity for yourself. And then, with the beauty of this is that if you can do that, then there's this opportunity, I think, for other people to move in that space of acceptance as well. You're modeling for them. You're modeling for them what you want.
How they might also find some peace.
Right. But if you're waiting for them to sort of say, oh, gee, Lisa, thank you. Oh, you've been so incredible. Like, that's just not going to happen. That's not going to, it may happen, but to
But we can't let go of needing to be validated.
Absolutely. I agree with that. So
We need
yeah.
to be appreciated.
Yeah, right. And I want to say this right now, that my family does appreciate me. It's just, and
Well, you need to hear it.
yeah,
You can't divine it, assume it. It's not theory. Somebody needs to say to you, wow, you're funny, or wow, you're smart, or wow, thank you, or
yeah, right. But I think people have a hard time appreciating outside of the roles and expectations that they have for others, right? So it's again, yeah, it's just, I think one of the things, like say with the I go back, I keep using the LGBTQ community. If you're,
yes, you do.
well, I keep using,
But it's a perfect.
it's
a
exactly,
perfect
for me, it's such a perfect example
model
of how. So if you're again, like a gay person in a family which struggles with that, but you start to show that you
are at peace,
and that you have, maybe you're getting many of your needs met.
That's
from
a gift
this,
to them, and an invitation
right,
to them to let go.
right, for them to start to realize, oh, there is
For them to access their love for you
way,
independent
right,
of that.
Yeah, and to sort of indirectly start to look at some of their own triggers,
to educate.
They may not ever directly ask the question, why do I have difficulty with gay people? They may never directly do that inquiry, which is a really good inquiry. But because lots of interesting stuff will come up into that inquiry, but at least they'll start to feel like, wow, okay, this is a legitimate way of being. It's not illegitimate.
It's a human way of being.
Yeah. Period.
Shut up.
And so that's, I think, in that, the reason, again, I go back to the family of origin is I know this is true. I know this deep in my bones, because I've seen it with my parents and their siblings and their relationships to their siblings and their parents as they got older. That desire to be, go back to what we talked about last time, to be seen and held by our family of origin never goes away, Norman. It never goes away, ever in our lifetime.
It's primal.
It's a primal need. And if we don't feel it, we feel bereft. We feel like something deep is missing.
Because something deep is missing. we're at like 50 minutes.
Yeah. So, I think that this is important stuff.
It's interesting that we've come full circle with last conversation, the segue being Lisa's note, and it just reinforces for me that we could talk about anything and still get down to the germinal stuff of life and the seminal stuff of being human. We could come in here and go, what's your favorite ice cream flavor, and wind up talking about the same thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, all these roads start to lead back to
That's right.
a sense of deep okayness.
Because we have the same questions, and we have the same humanity in common. Yeah. We really are all in this together with a capital T.
Yeah, and I think we're realizing that more and more. So then we need the skills to do that, because I think we're very used to this sort of
that's
rugged individualism, which is like a very big problem. So, because rugged individual leads to those nervous breakdowns, which my friend's about to have. So it's like it's yeah.
Well, yeah. Hopefully she'll get something from this.
I hope so. Yeah.
Hang in there, Lisa.
Hang in there, and also just so hang in there, everybody, and feel free to give us feedback about this, and also any other inquiries that you want us to specifically.
Yeah, you can reach me. You can go to my website and it'll tell you how to reach me in various ways. Norman Klein phd.com. Klein is Klein, and it'll have every which way to reach me. And any way you do, I'll be responsive.
Yeah. And you could also just respond on the YouTube site as well as YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Right on there. You can just make a comment.
But you
And we'll pick it up.
can't have pose individual or intimate questions that way.
Yes, they could. They could.
Well,
if
you
want to.
can,
Yes,
but I'm not
yeah.
doing. I'm not putting out in the ether my
Your response.
intimate stuff that's accessible forever. That's not happening.
Right. Well, we'll figure that out.
Right.
They can figure that out,
Right.
how to get in touch with us and how they would like to. But I do find it helpful, just as we're sharing here, the more, just as I was like timid today about sharing things that are going to go out on the ether forever, right? I think there is something very freeing, even to the point of like, kind of an excitement about that sort of like, how can I expose some truth about myself and see what happens? So however you want to interact with us, we will respect and welcome. So, yeah. Okay. Namaste.